And this man was then, in my judgment, the archetype of discovery-driven and market-driven product nylon. Nylon was also born during Second War time, and that time we needed things for parachutes. What kind of fibers will you use for parachutes? Because the silk base and all didn't have much strength. Nylon was born out of purely discovery-driven research, and it has been the biggest impact in the history of chemical industry, because then it got market-driven, and today you have aramid fibers, and you hear the famous thing of bulletproof chests. And bulletproof chests are impossible without aramid. And you may not recognize it, but the mobile phone which you formally carry inside has aramid fiber. The aramid fiber was aromatic polyamide. But look at what revolution it brought. The nylon was resin, all zips are nylon. The apparel part of nylon gave way to polyester, because polyester fiber for apparel purposes was far superior to nylon. But if you go back to 50s, most of the synthetic things were nylon, saris, shirtings, they were all nylon, pre-nylon shirts in UK and all. In America, corresponding Arrow shirts in nylon. So nylon represents best of chemical sciences. Unfortunately, as you know, Nobel Prize is not given posthumously. So Karuth has never got the Nobel Prize. But Haber got the Nobel Prize. And most important, Bosch, who engineered this, because engineering ammonia with so low carbon emissions, that high pressure, total recycle, nitrogen and hydrogen to be supra pure, that all oxygen containing impurities are below 5 ppm. So there should be no CO, no CO2, no water. Below 5 ppm. So Bosch engineered this, and Bosch also got Nobel Prize. Now, history of chemical industry is replete with people who did outstanding work in chemistry, which got commercialized and they got Nobel Prizes. I jump for a while just to give you how organometallic chemistry, homogeneous, I give you an example of heterogeneous catalysis. I give you two more examples just to wrap up my story. How homogeneous catalysis, which is so articulate in Britain, mostly inorganic chemists do, elsewhere in the world, or organic chemistry do. So organometallic chemistry falls, and these boundaries are disappearing. Wilkinson got this rhodium-based catalyst, which replaced the cobalt-based catalyst for oxo reaction, what you call Royal reaction. And olefin plus carbon monoxide plus hydrogen goes to the corresponding aldehyde with one carbon atom extra. It is hydroformylation reaction, Royal reaction, also different names for this. That pressure was brought down from 300 atmosphere to as low as 40-50 atmosphere. And that was homogeneous rhodium-based catalyst. Wilkinson got Nobel Prize. And between his fundamental papers in the best of the journals, because it was so exciting from fundamental research point of view, that within a matter of 3-4 years, this is one of the rare examples of such a short gap that person got Nobel Prize. But before that, you all know that for high density polyethylene, Ziegler Natta got the Nobel Prize. And that was serendipitous discovery, because stainless steel, which they were using, gave chromium in parts per million, supported polymerization of ethylene to give you high density polyethylene. But low density polyethylene invented by ICI in 1930s was also accidental discovery, because in high pressure ethylene compressor they found some places a wax leaking. The man was very articulate to see that this part must be something original. That is how low density polyethylene was invented. And low density polyethylene in 57-58, high density polyethylene, followed by a major breakthrough in 70s of fluidized bed polymerization of ethylene to give you linear low density polyethylene with co-monomers like butene 1, and a single stream plant could do even 2000 tons per day. 2000 tons per day of polyethylene, polypropylene are produced in fluidized bed polymerization, what I call a major breakthrough. And those of you who are interested in physical chemistry, adsorption, desorption, how adsorptive processes were used for separation, like practically all paraxylene in the world, which means many millions of tons, I'm talking of scale of operation like 30 million tons per annum, 30, where all the separation, because red and para have same boiling point, is done by adsorptive separation using zeolites, because paraxylene is a molecule which will enter into zeolite pores easily. There is a phenomenon of both thermodynamics and kinetics for you to be able to get pure paraxylene. Then, talking about organic chemistry, catalysis, a major breakthrough came in asymmetric synthesis. And people who work in asymmetric synthesis got Nobel Prizes, like Niori from Japan, who had synthetic menthol. We produce natural menthol. See, nature is the craftiest chemist. But we are able to beat nature somewhere. Somewhere we take a beating from nature. Why do I say so? You see all the colors which nature produces. But the diester chemistry, organic chemistry can give you any color that you want. You can demand any color you want. You can get a dye as well as a pigment. So we are able to beat nature. When it comes to perfumes, when I say chemistry is central to quality of life, surely you want perfumes. Now, have you realized that in perfumes, nature is the one which is supreme? Why? All the chemicals that we produce are synthetic. Because if you were to want rose, there are millions of roses you have to produce 1 kilo absolute rose or jasmine. But there is no language in perfumery and flavor. You will always say rose like, jasmine like, sandalwood like. Now if you want pure sandalwood oil, it costs you a fortune. He will give you synthetic sandalwood, sandalica at much lower cost. You take painkiller, they are still not able to beat morphine as a painkiller. So there are some places we are able to beat the nature. For example, natural pyroxides which we grow in Kashmir or Uganda and Kenya, they were the most powerful insecticides, but photo unstable. So how to bring in photostability in the organic molecule, where organic chemists and physical chemists work together? We have synthetic pyroxides, which make the whole area of insecticides radically different, because compared to DDT and malathion, you could use less than 1%. In fact, talking about these agrochemicals, our food security would have been impossible without fertilizers and without agrochemicals. And have you ever wondered that chemicals have ice? If you grow rice, for example, you see rice fields in Goa. Have you wondered how weeds are removed? You can't see by naked eye because the field is flooded. But chemicals have ice. So we put herbicides which selectively kill the herb or the weed, not the main plant. And the herb or the weed takes up nitrogen in disproportionately high way compared to the main plant. So you are giving all the inputs for the weed and the herbicide to grow. We have such wonderful herbicides today that we can use few grams per hectare, few grams to eliminate. So I say chemicals have eyes as well. That how they are able to diagnose between weed and the plant or herb and the plant. This is a very large industry, $40 billion. Perfumery flavor industry globally also of the order of $30–35 billion. But nothing can beat pharma. Pharma is today $700 billion. $700 billion. What is interesting is, and for PhDs in chemistry to know, there are such fantastic outlets in pharma industry today. There are pharma companies which have more than 100 PhDs working in their labs, R&D labs, both for APIs as well as for new chemical entity. 7 pharma companies in India are already $1 billion company each. And PhDs are required in large numbers, and enough qualified PhDs are just not available to industry. But let me take 2 or 3. I started with giving an example of anesthetic agent. But there are many other molecules. You take the history of aspirin, which is today 105 years old, still going places. because